Here, the Erick Erickson Show. The phone number, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. This hour of the program, sponsored by First Liberty Building and Loan in Noonan, Georgia, wherever you are in the United States. If you are in charge of access to capital and credit and lending and money for a business, check out First Liberty. If you need to grow your business, they want to help you. FirstLibertyGA.com is their website, FirstLibertyGA.com. First of all, my apologies to all of you. Thursday and Friday, some of you emailed me and said, I sound like, I think I've heard this. What's going on? We did not have time for guest hosts. I had a medical event, shall we say, on Wednesday. So let me, I don't want to get personal out of the gate, but I feel like I owe you an explanation. 4 years ago, I got clots in my lungs, and it happened again thereafter, and it was small, and I just had this weird, like, I felt like I was having an asthma attack event, and went, and sure enough, they couldn't tell whether it was new or old, but clearly there was something in my lungs, and that was now 2016, 2017. For the last couple of weeks, I have felt very much like I was having an asthma attack during commercial breaks. I would just say, you know how you run up a flight of stairs and you're fine until you get up to the top of the steps, and then suddenly you're, I was getting to commercial break and doing that and having to go use my inhaler. And first we thought it was asthma and was treating it as asthma. And then clearly there was something else going on. And Wednesday night I went to the ER thinking, I got to have a breathing treatment. My inhaler's not working. I'm having an asthma attack. 5-6 hours later, a CT scan revealed a teeny tiny, non-threatening clot in my lungs. You could barely see it, but it had caused my lungs to swell up like balloons, and the inflation was not going back down. They were not deflating. So they basically told me 3 days of no exercise and no talking on the radio. The 6 hours of talking that I'm doing is apparently not really good for my health. So now, that being said, I am better, back on my feet, and raring to go. And we got a lot that happened while I was out with the Israel situation, and there's a lot going on. And I want to begin with a couple of sound bites for the greater framing of what's going on. I want to play you 3 audio sound bites. There's very clearly, if we go back to the James Carville conversation about the wokes, one of the things James Carville said to Vox Media was that the media, the Democrats, need to do a better job of tying the Republicans to January 6th, making them the party of racist insurrectionists. And we're very clearly seeing that happen in the media. This is very clearly a strategy, coordinated or otherwise. In my experience, you do not have to get people in a back room to have this conversation and say, very clearly, here's what the polling says. We need you all to coordinate this messaging for the Republican Party. This is the talking point. You don't have to do that. What you have is you have a couple of prominent people come out on television. They give you the talking point on television in an interview, and everyone kind of gravitates towards it. And we're seeing this framing. I want to begin with Morning Joe, this conversation between Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski.
It really is strange, Mika. The more Republicans lose, the more of a personality cult Donald Trump seems to develop. You can look at his losses in 17. You can look at his losses in 18, historic losses. I mean, Republicans losing like they've never lost before in the House of Representatives is just as far as the pure vote totals. 19, they started losing governorships in the South, and then in 20 they lost the big race, lost the race for the presidency, lost Georgia, lost the Senate, lost the House. And so rational parties that actually want to rule, parties that want their policies to change instead of these putting forth these hyper gestures, they self-adjust and they start electing candidates that can get elected. Donald Trump's not that guy. He's just not that guy. And we've seen time and again that he puts, in many cases, people in a difficult position to win general elections. So we'll see what happens.
It has all the evidence of a serious cult. I'm not saying it as a joke. I'm not saying it as sort of not even an exaggeration at this point.
Yeah.
It has all the makings of a cult. It's a cult, not even exaggerating at this point. Which begs the question of was there prior exaggeration? And now very serious. Well, one more, Joy Reid here from MSNBC as well.
But if this isn't freaking you out, it should. Because Republicans are showing you that they are increasingly willing to treat your vote like a cute suggestion. That they can just hand over your votes to their friends to review because they didn't like the results. If you can't win fair and square, just retroactively change the results. Or at least sow doubt in those results so lots of people won't view the winner as legitimate. Let's go back to Arizona, where they've engaged in a months-long fishing expedition to try to taint President Biden's legitimate victory. Secretary of State Katie Hobbs has now informed the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors that she might not be able to allow the county to reuse hundreds of vote counting machines because she can't trust that they weren't tampered with during this bananas, bamboo paper, and cyber ninjas fake audit, with the ballot supposedly fed to chickens before the chickens were incinerated. This tomfoolery would be funny if it wasn't so serious. In the case of Arizona, it could cost Arizona taxpayers $6 million. So it's more funny, shocking, and frightening than actually funny. When a political system veers away from democracy, there are usually no good places for it to go. The great Merriam-Webster dictionary defines fascism as a political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation and often race above the individual and that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition. Forcible suppression of opposition, maybe by voter suppression or by making elections just poof, disappear.
Joy Reid. Okay, first of all, I need y'all to know Charlie does not like it when I ask him to cut up Don Lemon clips. Don Lemon actually makes Joy Reid. Don Lemon looks like a Mensa IQ genius compared to Joy Reid. It's fascinating listening to this woman talk. So she is engaged in cancel culture. Joy Reid participates in cancellation of those views she disagrees with, and yet believes it's the Republicans who are fascist. You got that? You got that? All right. We got to play one more piece here before we get into the point. This is Perry Bacon Jr., a columnist for the Washington Post. Have you ever noticed that when reporters, and Perry Bacon Jr. was a Washington Post reporter, when a reporter at a major media institution becomes a columnist, he is almost always uniformly liberal? Have you ever noticed that? Here he is.
Two columns. You said the state of American democracy is, it's even worse than you think. So how should the reality-based press cover an alternative reality GOP?
Honestly. I mean, I think that's the key important thing here is cover it honestly. I think we've had this view for a long time, and journalism should be not aligned with either party, but I think we've interpreted it to mean journalism should be equally distant between the two parties, and I think that's not realistic. Journalism has a bias for facts, evidence, truth. And if like half of the voters in one party and a lot of the elected officials in a party are not being truthful, journalists are going to cover that and look like they're covering that party more negatively. So in this environment, we have to prioritize. We have to be pro-truth, pro-democracy, pro-evidence, and I think that's going to make it look like we're pro-democratic. But I think we should be pro-democratic, small d, not pro-democratic, capital D.
Stand up for democracy, stand up for decency. But Nicole Hemmer, doesn't that just cause even more shots of media bias and an even more polarized landscape and an even more fractured country?
Well, I don't think it causes it. It is a response to it in many ways, right?
Okay.
That what else can you do but to cover the issue of the insurrection and to point out when Republicans are showing an anti-small d Democratic bias, because that is an existential issue, not just for journalists, but for the country. And to not be honest and to not stay on that beat, even as Republicans try to memory hold the insurrection.
We can leave it there. You get the point here. Reporters, journalists, members of the media have a very high-minded view of themselves. Many of these people think the First Amendment applies only to them. In fact, several years ago, there were a number of reporters who actually were making the case that the First Amendment is their amendment. Some of them privately believe it, even though they now have been publicly so shamed into repudiating the view. But privately, they still believe it. It is theirs, the First Amendment. They believe they have a right. They believe that they, by virtue of their surroundings, educational background, and where they live and what they do, they have an obligation to truth. And yet, in Texas over the weekend, they passed a law banning consideration of critical race theory in schools. You cannot teach from critical theory. And the law explicitly says you still must teach about slavery and white supremacy and the Civil War. But the headlines in the New York Times and the Huffington Post and MSNBC and the like all said that this law would ban teaching about slavery and racism in this country, which is not true. Just couldn't do it through the frame of critical theory. The media you see is part of the Democratic Party. There are some in the media who try to be fair. There are some in the media who are fair. There are some in the media who are conservative. But by and large, the national political press in this country is part of the Democratic Party now. And they're more interested in narrative than they are in fact. So they can call the Republicans the party of fascism while themselves organize to cancel anyone who disagrees with them. They can say they're interested in truth when they're actually interested in narrative. And they can say the GOP is a cult when they themselves are part of the death cult of the Democratic Party that thinks that killing a child is a woman's choice. They can say all of these things, and they can really believe these things are true, even though it's not. But there's something larger going on here. You need to understand. We are headed towards 2022. That is a midterm election. In midterm elections, the party that doesn't control the White House tends to do very well. Right now, Republicans could take back the House of Representatives just on redistricting alone. They don't even need the wins at their back. They just need redistricting, and they can take back the House and make gains at the state legislative level for the next decade. And the Democrats and their friends in the media know this, and they've got to do everything possible to push back on that. At the same time, you know, Donald Trump did exceedingly well with Black and Hispanic and Asian voters compared to the rest of the GOP. Donald Trump actually did a really good job with Black and Hispanic voters compared to so many Republicans who've come before him. So the Democrats have to do something, and the media, therefore, has to do something. What do? Well, first of all, you amplify the idea Republicans are cult and racist. You try to tie every Republican to January 6th. By the way, I don't know if you've heard Liz Cheney is having none of it. Jonathan Swan on HBO tried to get her on record that she thinks that the election reform challenges are all tied to January 6th and stolen election nonsense. She was having none of it. Liz Cheney herself, someone who is adamant that January 6th is tied to the president, refuses to say that that's why Republicans are changing election laws and actually defends the election law changes. Republicans are pretty united on this front. So she's not going to be the hero that the left wants her to be on this sort of stuff. You have a crime wave across America. With a crime wave across America, you've got a lot of local voters in local areas of the country rebelling against some of them George Soros appointed district attorneys. George Soros picked them, and then they won the election with his money. You've got a ton of reality setting in, and they can't talk about it. So this is why, for example, the media has spent way more time talking about Liz Cheney and Donald Trump. Even today, 2 weeks after Liz Cheney was removed from her office, they're still interviewing Liz Cheney and talking about Liz Cheney. Despite the Israel-Palestinian situation, there was mass violence across America this past weekend where people sympathetic to Palestinians set upon Jews and beat them up around the country. Got very limited coverage. Why? Because they can't tie the Republicans to it. All of this is about setting the groundwork for 2022. They don't care what the truth is. They're part of the Democratic Party now, which, by the way, is why so many people continue to go down conspiracy theory rabbit holes, because they know they're not getting the truth from the media. They're just getting a story from the media. So they go in search of truth. They find someone with their own confirmation bias, tells them what they want to hear, and pulls them down a rabbit hole into a conspiracy theory that isn't so, but it's no more or less credible than what they're hearing in the media, so they might as well go for it. The media itself is building a nation of conspiracy theorists. The media itself is complicit in the rise of QAnon. The media itself is helping the Republican Party because they don't have Donald Trump every day now. He's been banned from social media. Probably the greatest gift Donald Trump could get is being banned from social media. And still the media is obsessed with him and the Republican Party. And so many people are out in this world scared to go out of their house because they know they're going to get shot or mugged thanks to Democratic policies, while the media tells them it's Donald Trump and the Republicans who want the police state. You know, right now, that doesn't sound so bad when there's a crime wave in your city.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Erick